Welcome to the Crawler and the Mage D&D podcast. I'm Crawler.
And I'm Mage.
Today we're going to talk about the core races from the player's handbook. The Dragonborn, Dwarf, Elf, Gnome, Half-Elf, Halfling, Half-Orc, Human, and the Tiefling. We're just going to do a quick little summary, just a quick overview, just to help anybody getting into D&D find some. What are your thoughts on the Dragonborn?
So the Dragonborn, to start things off, is cool as fuck.
That's the only thing it has going for it, though.
And that's about all I really have to say in the positives for it, because the traits are kinda useless. Mainly because its Dragon Breath is the only good thing, and the fact that it gets Draconic for free, like, those are the only good things. Even then, the Dragon's Breath is awful for a number of reasons. Number one, it requires your action, so it's basically, you can either, do I want to take this stupid Dragon's Breath that has 0 range and does 0 damage, or do I want to use a potion, cast a giant spell, use an attack weapon, use like an attack with my weapon, which has infinite uses and can do a lot more damage probably.
No, I agree. So the one thing that we do know about D&D 1 at this point, they are changing. We'll see what they end up changing it to. So hopefully it gets better. Also,
hopefully they get new traits.
Yeah, exactly, right? So they have done some tweaking, and we'll get into it down the road, but they're clearly aware that it needs work. Now, the one thing about 5th edition that was a saving grace, the Crystal Dragonborns the Gem Dragonborns are pretty cool. They end up getting flight and cooler stuff, and they just frankly, somehow they made the cool dragon cooler. So that was pretty sweet.
Yeah, once they made 3 different types of Dragonborn, the Chromatic, Metallic, and Gem Dragonborn, basically fix them because all 3 of them do something cool. Even the Chromatic one, which is generally the same, was at least slightly buffed from its original Dragonborn status.
Yeah,
to at least be a little bit more interesting.
No, it's true though. They have a place in D&D though. That's what matters.
Yeah, pretty much all 9 of these races. It's just an overview of all 9 of them right off the bat. All of them are iconic.
Right.
So it's going to be really hard for us to find something bad to say about them.
No, it's true. Do you have anything else you want to share on the Dragonborn?
That's really all to say. Final closing statement. The Dragonborn is cool as hell. And do not read the traits, just don't worry, they're cool as hell.
What are your thoughts on the Dwarf?
The Dwarf is just a staple in D&D and media in general. It's a good, solid introduction to D&D if you want to put something that isn't a human. Because it's a good bridge of, this is still pretty human, so it's pretty familiar to newer players. Also having a lot of unique lore and depth, depending on how far you want to take it.
True. So the drunk dwarf is such a staple, in my opinion. On top of the fact that the dwarf, I could see the dwarf being any of the core classes too. They're just perfect. They're frankly, they're a little angry. They're a little Scottish. They can be uptight. You can do whatever you want with the dwarf. They're such a well used just race. I feel like everybody does. There's no way to mess it up, which is what's awesome about them. The prototypical like shield hammer paladin, I just love that concept as a whole. Do you have anything else on the dwarf?
I do actually have one fun fact about dwarves that I've been meaning to talk about for a while in this perfect chance. Did you know that dwarves actually can't reproduce naturally? They have to, like, build new dwarves. That's really interesting.
They what?
I'm pretty sure they have to, like, build new dwarves using, like, stones or something.
Fuck, that sounds awesome. I've never heard this before.
Kind of, like, hidden piece of dwarf lore, but I'm pretty sure it did exist in one of the versions. I'm not sure if it exists in 5e because they removed a lot of lore.
So I don't do very much, like, epic length campaigns to where my character has kids or whatever. So I've never really gone into it. But that sounds pretty sweet, honestly. That sounds like a cool way to do it. Like, I feel like, back to Dragonborns then, they should be laying eggs. I feel like this is the way it should be.
Yeah, a lot of the races in D&D, it's just a really good thing about D&D. A lot of the races in D&D have incredible lore behind them if you just pay attention to them. Although sometimes they can be a bit restrictive, which makes sense why people tend to ignore all the lore for the races.
Which is very true, but I think one of the things that the dwarf has going for it is we know little skilled fighter, minor, works well with stone and metal. Like, we know that, everybody almost knows that. Like, the dwarves don't quite have that. Apparently, weird breeding aside, they don't really have that issue though, which is interesting. Any more thoughts?
That's all I had to say for the dwarf. They're just a staple in media, and they're just good.
What are your thoughts on the elf?
Oh boy, where do I start with the elf? I I think I can sum the elf up with this one statement. You are pretentious, but can back up your talk with a shit ton of power. Elves are just really good.
True. They make a hell of a villain.
Yeah, they make great villains, they make great heroes, they make great questionably morally questionable people. Just, they're great. Their representation of media has always made them be these, like, legendary figures. In D&D, it's slightly less legendary as you'd expect from them, but they're still really interesting. They're really dynamic, and they're just really good. They're just definitely another staple in media, because you see elves literally everywhere in media, maybe even more so than dwarfs.
Yeah, well, because like Lord of the Rings, you think of Legolas. Like Zelda, you think of Link. I think you make a good point. Though my probably only critique with elves, it's not they're just not they don't, or I can't see every class be or every elf being every class. Like being a barbarian, like it just doesn't fit because of the stereotype we give. Now it doesn't mean it can't be done, and now I want to do it.
Yeah, with all the races, you can definitely make a fish out of water type character, but typically that's a lot more restrictive and a bit awkward to pull off, even for skilled players.
True, true. But like veteran players, someone who sits down and like decides to make an elf. Well, so currently I have 3 elves in my current campaign, 3 kinds of elves without going too into it. So they're loved though. People love them. We have 5 players. I feel like I should throw that up. 5 players and 3 of them were elves. So that's pretty, or elf-like stuff. I don't know. Do you have anything else to share on elves?
No, that's really all I'd say. Final closing statement is just, elves, you are pretentious, but for a good reason.
Okay, okay. You now bring up the fact is the thing is they do live like hundreds and hundreds of years. I would be pretentious too.
Oh yeah, definitely. That's why I'm not denying that.
Just throw that out there. What are your thoughts on gnomes?
Gnomes are very funny. Basically, if you thought that the dwarf was the cranky short guy with a temper, you have not met a gnome.
I wouldn't call them cranky. I'd call them energetic.
There's definitely a lot of different ways to play it, but most of the gnomes that I see are either cranky, energetic, or this weird combination of two that's really scary.
It's true. I tend to see them as small tinkers. That's what I love about them. I also think they're very noob friendly because if you have a new player, especially a kid, because that's typically I feel like when most people get into D&D, you have a kid who wants to be a small person. You can. They're great for role play because if you have a strong character, they can like buddy up and pick them up and do fun stuff. They're normally rather intelligent. They just have all these fun little things going on, and that's what I think makes them awesome. They're another thing besides maybe a strength build, which you can still do, of course. But without a strength build, you can just make so many cool concepts with gnomes. And it actually even makes me like the artificer because being a tiny person in like a metal suit of armor to get the strength boost and all that stuff seems awesome. Which I know you've done recently.
That's literally the character I'm playing now.
Well, but that's fun though. Like, it's fun to make a character who is a jack of all trades, getting there from like a weird way. Well, like, why'd you make your current character? Is that why?
Yeah, purely because I just wanted to play a small character, and I was like, hey, small energetic adventurer. They're a giant tinkerer. They're a small tinkerer guy. Yeah.
I mean, I think it's pretty sweet. It's a good concept. Well, again, we'll check in on these our campaign further down the road. We're only a few weeks in, and with the holidays and all that stuff, we've missed a little bit here and there, but we'll update people on that down the road. Anything else on gnomes?
No, that's all I had to say for the gnomes.
What are your thoughts on half elf?
Okay, so for this one, I also have one sentence that can describe the half elf. You are pretentious, but unlike that elf, you can't back up your talk with power.
Oh yeah, that's because you die way sooner, and they do get a lot of cool stuff though. Actually, I don't know if I see people play half elves a lot. Half races are kind of weird in D&D. I think that's another thing that they're gonna fix in D&D 1, where everything can be half because you end up just picking like a skill tree and your looks. So if you decide to look different than your skill tree, you're a half something. I think that's a really cool approach on it. Coming up with like super unique things based off of this and that, I just think it's kind of unnecessary.
Yeah, as someone who in their first campaign ever of D&D and their first time ever playing D&D who played a half elf, let me just tell you, they are fucking boring. They're a jack of all trades. Basically, they're supposed to be a jack of all trades between the good of the elf and the good of the human. But the problem is, they get neither of the good parts of either of them and nothing original of their own. Even though it's just a weird amalgamation that isn't even an amalgamation. It's just there.
That's true. You're basically a human with pointy ears, which
Yeah, the best usage that I can find of a half elf is because of their ability to have extra skills and both knowing Common, Elvish, two very good languages, and then a third language. You're definitely a very good roleplay based character. If you want to make a roleplay based build, like maybe a sorcerer or a rogue with a shit ton of skills, then yeah, definitely you can definitely make a good character for that. But otherwise, they're just every other race does better at things.
So for an easy role play scenario, being a half elf, typically half human, in an elf world, first of all, it's Link's kind of scenario, but because elves are such good villains, being a half elf, especially again half human, you can make a lot of really cool stories of my mother was an elf and the renegade human, messed up, frankly, deflowered the princess, and I'm actually a prince for you could just make such a cool story, connect things beautifully with them. So the half stuff does work out really cool, but I think that's all half stuff. I don't think it has to be half elves per se. Um, it's just nice, but they also have charisma, which is strange. That's one thing I appreciate about again newer books that and especially what we tend to do now is +1, +1, +1. We did remove the racial traits of most stuff. I just think that they need a lot of work.
That's a problem with races in general is that like 80% of races just have dark vision for no apparent reason.
Yeah, it's a bit weird. But the good news is with half elves though, they have a lot going for them, so that's good. And it's good role play. Which what else do you really need in D&D? Like stats aside, because everybody can make a cool stat stick if you feel like it. The hard part is investing in the story.
Yeah.
Anything else on half elves?
Closing arguments on the half elf, you do have things that you're good at, just someone else is probably better at them.
You can build any race, in my opinion, to be a one-trick pony if you feel like it. So I don't think that statement is mostly true.
Well, the thing is, even if you're saying, oh, you can build anything to be a one-trick pony, if you want something that's more generic, just play the human. The human is infinitely better at everything that the half elf tries to do.
We'll get there when we get to the human. The free feat thing.
Yeah.
That's a whole other wonderful.
Not even just the variant human, the regular human, but that's just something we'll get to in a moment.
Yeah. So what are your thoughts on the halfling?
Fuck the lucky trait.
Really, I think it's so cool. I wish every race had something as unique as that. Something that
I'm pretty sure all the races do get something unique, because I'm pretty sure every race has feats that specifically require you to play a certain race. Like, I know that goblins have a bunch of feats that require you to be a goblinoid.
No, but of course there are feats and stuff, but like, just being a halfling, you immediately know what you're good at. You immediately know what kind of character you could. Now, you can I like to mention this for any new player listening. You can always change the meta. You don't have to min-max. You don't have to do that stuff. Make the character that's in your head. Do not become stat stick. Unless, hear me out, you feel like it. You do whatever you want with your character. But the halfling bard, the generic thing that you kind of think of, I like the fact that they point people in a support direction and almost reward you for doing that by re-rolling one, by making you not feel useless. Being good at dex is such a cool thing. It's such a good trade-off, I feel like. Again, it just feels unique. Actually, now that I think about it, most of the races don't feel like they'd be super great at strength builds. But come on, what if someone decided to make a barbarian halfling? That's funny.
Yeah, just to kind of go on more of a rant of what I was saying about the lucky feat is that just, yeah, I think every race should have definitely like a feature, just something that's like, boom, okay, this is what you're good at. My problem is that the lucky feat makes no sense for it to be on only halflings, or at least it's very hard to justify it for me to believe it. And just, I feel like the only reason anybody picks the halfling is because it gets the lucky feat. Like, I don't really know what else halflings do, because anybody else I've ever talked to who plays a halfling was just for the lucky feat, because it's easily the most broken feat in the game, hands down, because it's generic, there's nothing limiting it, and it's just, it can be used in almost any like scenario.
Well, so this is the thing about the gnome and the halfling, and it's kind of leading from what you just came from. The thing about the gnome and the halfling that are, and I guess the dwarf, your dwarf is typically your stronger of the smaller races. Your gnome is typically a tinker, and your halfling is typically entertaining of some kind. So I feel like D&D did an okay job at giving you like shorter races. They didn't just do like one generic short race and then let you spider it out. They gave lore for 3 different stuff. Now you get goblins and other stuff down the road, but I feel like they did a really good job at the core book at giving you 3 different. Even though I know you're actually not even considered small, you're considered medium. I think that's changed. But I don't know. I feel like they're just cool that they're. When I think of a dwarf, I think this. When I think of a gnome, I think that. When I think of a halfling, I think of Lucky. It makes you want to play them depending on what you're going. And it also really, as a DM, it's really great to have villages of certain skill sets. Or like a little band of halflings running around with like their instruments who are maybe lucky, who you describe as like everybody likes these people. You describe as like the town goofballs, the town jester, whatever the case may be. When something happens to them, you hope your players actually give a damn. Now, that's a whole other problem, player buy-in. But if you make a little lovable halfling and they heal people and they save people and they're just a funny little person, I think the halfling can be wonderful. Any more thoughts?
And that's really it. Final closing statement is just halflings. You have the lucky feat, and just play any other race and then pick it up for your 4th level feat.
Fair enough. Half orcs. What are your thoughts on them?
Half orcs. Arrow 404. Can you not found?
Really, I think half orcs is. Now, to be fair, most people just use it as I'm an orc. No one ever really talks about the half part. It's another thing they're getting rid of in D&D 1, where the orc is going to be in the core book, we believe, anyways, at this current part in 2022. But they have a lot. I think that's what's cool about them. You can use them. You have like the Dragonborn, they're cool, and you have like a monstrous race. Basically part of my thing with the core 9 characters, you have 3 monsters, 3 human-like, and 3 mini people, and I think that's what's pretty well done up front. The orc, being your big, strong, whatever, that archetype is awesome. And again, I think I'm just really positive about D&D as a whole.
Yeah, I think the half-orc being the big, dumb Bruco Bonk is definitely a good thing for it. It's definitely a very fun and interesting character to play with. So yeah, I think that's definitely very good, but it's just very obviously meant to be the beat stick, the dumb beat stick role, and it does that good. So I don't really have any complaints about it. It's just, it's not a complaint, it's more of an observation.
Well, you also don't really play big beat sticks very often.
I don't like playing big beat stick characters. At least if I do, I like to make them pretty intelligent, or at least I like making them competent.
Right. So what I think is kind of cool, again, more about the +1++, or I think it's Tasha. Yeah, it's the Tasha rule. Getting rid of, like, if you make an orc, but you don't have to go strength con to like feel or to make your character. If you decide to make a big dumb troll-like or goofball, or I don't know, let's try and think of one like if you're trying to make Goofy, right? You could make Goofy as an orc. Now, dog people, whatever, but you make a big, tall goofball, get intelligence, get a little spell, make a rogue. Who cares what you do? I feel like I think maybe something that you've done a little bit is you think class and immediately go to what you're bad. Maybe you think of like, what could they're bad at something I don't like, but I feel like you could just do anything with an orc. They're iconic, which help.
Yeah.
Any more thoughts on orcs or half orcs in general?
Yeah. Final closing statement on the half orc. Bonk.
Yeah, fair enough. What are your thoughts on humans?
Yes.
What do you think, they get too much love in D&D?
Yes.
I mean, reasonable. I just think that it kind of needs to be that way because we know in like the real world how many types of humans there are.
Yeah, the humans are just the jack of all trades that can do anything and have the power to do anything.
It's true, though. But the fact that they have to represent everyone in our world in D&D just by saying human, they don't specify what kind, is all right. Now, what I do think is weird, especially the variant human, the feet thing, is a little bit strange.
Yeah, variant human, I don't know why it exists. I don't know what it's meant to represent, but just giving a feat that can start at just level 1, as you can see from a lot of low-level, like, broken builds on YouTube, literally all of them use variant human. That's for a very good reason. It's just broken as hell.
I agree. Well, even the regular human, you get a +1 to all.
Even the regular human, just getting a +1 to literally all 6 stats, every other race usually gets like a max of a +3. Even though this is more spread out, it's still a +6 at the end of the day, and you get extra languages, which is a lot more useful than people think it is, even if it's underused.
Oh yeah, people are always surprised whenever something's speaking blank and blank. Oh my god, I know it. It really helps. But yeah,
Yeah, that's one thing with DMing in general, and we'll have to cover this later when we talk about DMing more in depth. But I think people should use languages, and like DMs should use languages, and like look at their party's known languages and use that more often.
I also think that a lot of players forget after a while what they have. Yeah, languages get tossed aside.
Yeah,
Unless they're really important. What I think DMs don't do well enough is like make them a little bit important, or at least make the player feel a little special by, well, of course, like there's just two people talking. You happen to know because you happen to speak blank
Yeah.
and blank. Like I do think that's not enough. That doesn't happen enough, but it doesn't really work in one shots most of the time, and
Yeah.
in long story campaigns. The NPC introduction, I think, and this is maybe a me criticism, making them more unique up front, making characters who don't all speak common, that kind of stuff.
I think players just kind of slap on languages because it's just like, this will be used like 3 times maybe if I pick the right languages. So I'm gonna just pick all the generic ones that most likely everyone else is gonna take. So we like if we encounter an NPC, it's likely that they're gonna speak one of these languages if they don't speak common, things like that.
So what I find funny though, when people, because we do character creation together, right? Like our group does, and like this is just people in general. People will say, "Well, you're a blank, you're an elf, so I'll pick Elvish," but they never use that as to like talk in front. Like the blacksmith is a minotaur. He probably doesn't speak Elfish, right? Like he might, but he probably doesn't. The players don't like enough go, well, I want to talk in front of this person, but I don't want him to hear it. So I'm saying blank in this language. I don't even think that happens enough. I think that language as a whole, and specifically with our group, and like I watch a lot of play, it just doesn't get involved enough. It's really hard to do though, especially because like in the real world, I only speak one language. So, and frankly, I speak it poorly. So what are you gonna do? Any more thoughts on humans?
Final thoughts on humans. Yes, the race.
Yes, the race. What are your thoughts on tiefling?
Tiefling, they are cool as fuck, and they actually have the power to back it up this time.
That's true. I like the fact that in the core rulebook here and the player's handbook, you have said that a few times, which is pretty awesome. Like, it's cool to see that. Like, I mostly agree. The tiefling. So, my favorite character, why I go by Crawler, is Nightcrawler. I'm gonna be real honest. He's a tiefling. I have been a blue tiefling in like 4 of my 20 characters. Just saying. So, but they're just awesome, and I can see a tiefling being any class. They're cool. You have a tail and horn. They're normally charismatic. They have normally innate magic. You're probably from a hellish dimension or at least a curse.
All tieflings are the result of like some kind of demonic pact or some kind of encounter in a bloodline with demonic magic or demons, etc., which is just great for lore building and gives a lot of built-in lore just by nature because of how tieflings are treated by other people. Their existence, their creation are just a mystery that can be molded by the DM and the players. There's not all, they're just great story tools, and their traits are just incredible. They're really interesting, and they're fairly unique.
Exactly, that's what it is. They're fairly unique, which helps. They have their own corner of D&D, which is pretty.
The tiefling just fills their own corner. Like there are definitely a lot of other races that fit into that corner of weird fish out of water races, but the tiefling is just the OG and the king of basically being the outsider race.
My thing with tieflings, my favorite storyline with tieflings, sorry, is the fact that my ancestors had a curse, found a cursed weapon, agreed to do this, agreed to do that, and now I'm cursed and have to fix it. I think it's such a cool story to do, almost regardless of scenario. I'm adventuring because curse. Curse makes me do blank. It's probably my favorite story. Again, it's also Nightcrawler related, so I'm pretty straightforward on where my my opinions come from, so that's pretty pleasant. Anything else on the tiefling?
Final words on the tiefling. Yeah, they're pretty good. I don't have much to say for the closing argument for that one. I feel like I just talked well enough to not need a closing argument.
This is our player's handbook in basic races.
Thank you guys for listening in. If you enjoyed, leave a like, subscribe, share the channel with friends. If you want to check more of me out, you can search me up on YouTube, Mage9. I stream on the weekends and sometimes some other miscellaneous stuff, uploading videos and shorts and whatnot. If you want to see more of Crawler, you can check them out on Twitch. With that, I'll see you guys later, and remember to keep rolling.